Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Down, face down. You know the routine.
Hello, my name is Satie Gossett. Welcome to another episode of Pan and Zoom, where we talk to creatives about being creative. Today, my guest, Jongnic Bontemps.
Thank you.
Music composer for various mediums. He's going to bless us with his experience and his wisdom and just tell us what's underneath the hood.
Wow, that's a lot.
Right.
You said expectations very high for wisdom. I don't know about that.
Hey, I'll take what I can get.
Okay, fair enough. Okay.
So here on the show, we like to talk to guests about their craft. Like, what was their aha moment? What was their big break? Just their beginning. So let's just start from the beginning.
From the beginning.
You
want to go back to the archives? Okay.
Yes.
Well, when I was 4 years old,
Mm-hmm.
my mother wanted to hear the organ in the house. Her mother was an organ player, so she grew up listening to the organ. So she unfortunately never got a chance to learn herself, but she wanted to hear it. So, of course, like all Jamaican mothers, she enlisted child labor, meaning that I was now going to be the house organ player. And at 4 years old, I started this instrument that I thought was horrible. But still, I stuck with it, eventually moved to piano. And all throughout my formative years, grade school, middle school, high school, I played in bands, sang in choirs, wrote songs.
Did you have teachers that guided you in how to play organ and the piano?
I had many teachers. My mom paid for piano lessons and guitar lessons and drum lessons all throughout, grade school, which was wonderful. And she really supported, my desire to learn music. And I actually went to a private school on the North Shore of Long Island that actually had a music program. Can you imagine that? So I played in a jazz band. I accompanied singers. I sang in various choruses and choirs. And for my senior project, my band, we actually recorded an album. I even worked at Sam Ash Music as a kid. I started out Christmas time. The person who would help take packages from, inside the store, people's cars. I did that, I think, when I was like 13 or 14 years old. And eventually, all throughout high school, I worked at Sam Ash Music. So I was always around music as a kid.
Total extraneous question. Did you get tips?
I did get tips because I didn't get paid from Sam Ash when I first doing the car thing because I was a child, so they couldn't pay me. But I did get tips. So it was pretty, good entrepreneurial spirit there on my part. But I was always around music, even in church, sang in choirs throughout. So at this point, I was just embodied, just sort of surrounded by music as a kid. And I didn't think I was going to do music for a living because all of the people who I really admired, who were amazing musicians, whether they be my teachers or people who played in church or folks that I sort of came around, they all had a difficult life. Many of them lived home with their moms because it was just so hard to make a living in music, right? Even though they were amazing musicians and better than I ever hoped to be. So my thought was, well, music will just be a hobby for me. I always enjoy it, but I'm going to go get a job where I can actually move out and I'm going to be a lawyer. So I went off to my college. I decided to study music, but the idea was, well, you can do whatever you want undergrad as long as you get good enough grades.
What college did you go to?
Oh, I went to Yale.
Okay.
It was a small school in New Haven you never heard of. Sorry. So yeah, I did my undergrad at Yale. And I was like, well, you know what? It doesn't really matter what I study. I'm just going to get good grades because I really enjoy music. And I'll take the LSAT. And I'll go to law school. Well, first part was great. I studied music. I got good grades. I took the LSAT. I was not going to law school.
Really?
Yes.
It's like you didn't pass?
I failed the LSAT.
Oh.
Yes. I mean, you technically can't fail the LSAT, but I felt like I failed the LSAT because my scores were not going to allow me to get into the schools that I really wanted to. So I went to Plan B, which wasn't really much of a Plan B. I was also interning at Sony Music on 550 Madison Avenue in New York City. So I'd travel from New Haven down to New York City 2 to 3 times a week for this internship that I was, writing a paper about the music business. And that was I was getting credit for it, which was great. And I was able to finagle them to give me a job when I graduated. So I went in as a coordinator, meaning I was an assistant, to 2 marketing people. One who I'd interned with for the year and a half that I was there, and a new person who they had just hired, and they kind of thrust me on her. I don't know if she was very willing, because she ended up firing me 6 months later.
Also, was that a personality thing?
I think it was a personality thing. I think I was not her choice, right? I think she had an assistant that she was used to working with. And, quite honestly, I don't think she was really happy with my work. So regardless, I ended up getting fired from that job, and I found a new job by answering an ad in the paper. I know some of the folks might know what a
Village Voice? Was it in the Village Voice?
I don't know if it's the Village Voice. It could have been the Village Voice, or it could have been the New York Times one ad.
I'm hoping Village Voice.
It could have been Village Voice. I don't remember this. It might have been New York Times, though, because there was a thick paper, and then you go to the want ads, because it was before Monster.com or any of those kind of things.
Wait, Recycler? Did they have the Recycler? I think that was only L.A.
No, it might have been L.A. So I went and I looked.
He knows about the Recycler.
Nobody does. Nope. Sorry, man. Does this paper actually exist?
Not anymore.
Okay. I miss things from our formative years. But anyway, I ended up answering an ad in the paper for a computer programmer wanted. No experience necessary.
Oh, well.
Speaking of me, I like computers. I had dabbled in computers, and I had no real experience. So I was like, this is a perfect job for me. I show up at the guy's house. I was a ripe old age of like 22 years old. I guess I had bubbling enthusiasm and energy, and I don't know what else he saw in me, but he hired me. And I tell you, it was an interesting stint there. I took about 4 days of training, and by day number 5, I was the expert at the client, and I was no expert. Long story short, I ended up taking my work home from the client to his place almost every night. And in the course of 3 months, I really learned Visual Basic, SQL databases or SQL databases, and was able to build basically programs in Access. And that launched a career that spanned 15 years that started in Silicon Alley, New York City, where I worked on websites like freshdirect.com, bluefly.com, skymall.com, and built all those. Eventually going to California, Silicon Valley, and working with a startup in the software security space that was eventually purchased by HP.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. So, 15 years later, in the age of, not even 15 years, maybe like 13 years later, like maybe 35, I was in charge of a multinational, multi-million-dollar product line for HP. And I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do with my life now? And not like I'd really arrived, but my choices were continue on this route and maybe become a chief technology officer or chief information officer, for a company. And I was definitely on the road for that. Or this thing called music popped its head back up.
So concurrently, while you're kind of moving up the ranks of technology, did you foster your music underneath at the same, did you go home and compose stuff, or just
not at all
back burner? Okay.
Not at all. I didn't even really practice piano at all. I don't know what happened or what sort of inspired me, but around that time when, I was transitioning to work at HP, I just started practicing again. I started playing the piano again. I had the same piano that my mother and father had bought for me when I was about 6-7 years old. I had moved that over to California with me, and I just started playing it. I hadn't touched it in years. Just started.
Just muscle memory?
And some muscle memory. Well, the muscles were definitely had atrophied. So it was a horrible auditory experience at first. But, got better, just doing it for my own enjoyment. Eventually, I started playing in church, and again, I wasn't like the main keyboardist because those people are really amazing. I was like the backup keyboardist.
Gotcha.
So, the person who would do little runs and little, brass hits on the side on the keyboard. So I started doing that. I discovered this thing called Logic. or sorry, GarageBand. It wasn't even Logic. It was GarageBand on my Mac work computer. And I said, oh, what's this thing? I started writing some music. I said, oh, and I remembered I actually knew what chords were and melodies and bass lines. And it all sort of came back to me. And I wrote a piece of music. Maybe it was like a third or fourth piece of music that I'd written on there. And I sent it to a friend of mine. And she said, that sounds like film music. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Film music? There's music in film? There's music in video games? You've got to be kidding me. That's a job? And they pay people to do that job? I was like, I want to do that job. I can do that job. And I look back at that moment and I just marvel at my hubris that I thought that, at 35, I could just change careers and become a film composer. I had no idea the arduous road I was about to put myself and my family on. But at that point, it was just unbridled enthusiasm and excitement about a new possibility.
Now, once you kind of had that kind of aha moment, did you start paying attention to film scores?
I did.
Like John Williams?
I did. I was more sort of a Thomas Newman kind of guy. So I was obviously American Beauty, Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile. I started paying more attention to those kind of scores. So it kind of spoke to me more than the John Williams tradition, which was, big orchestral. I was kind of more of a moody person, I guess. So those were the things I was paying attention. But I also paid attention a lot to video game scores. I remember playing that game Uncharted.
Oh, yeah.
And, oh my gosh. And that score for Uncharted was ridiculous. And I was like, wow, people are out there writing stuff like this. And this is what I want to do. So I started paying more attention, to especially video game scores. And again, being in Northern California, that was the first sort of music community I was able to, for lack of a better term, infiltrate.
And by infiltrating, did you come in cold or did you have people that you knew that you networked with?
Well, I knew from business that you can never be just a name on a piece of paper. People have to know who you are. All those tech companies that I worked for over the years, I never applied for a job. I knew people. And they're saying, hey, we're doing this thing. Come on over and work with us. Right? And I had such a reputation of being, such a great technology leader and project manager that people were like excited to have me. Oh, we're able to get JB to work on this project with us. So it was like a no-brainer to have me sort of move along. So I said, you know what? This is the same thing I'm going to need in this industry. People need to know who I am and look at me as an asset. We're lucky to have this guy. But of course, I had no skills. But what I still had was my personality. So I infiltrated the gay music community by interning at a place called Paramount. So I'm working full time on my job. I decided to start taking, online classes at Berklee School of Music online. So I'm doing that. So that's the education part. And the money part's my, contingent. And by this point, of course, I had, I was married for several years. I had 2 boys. So I couldn't just drop my job and run off and do music. So I had to continue to earn a living and support my family and myself. But then the community part was a school called Paramount in San Francisco that was focused on building education and community and also music production. So they had 3 arms that they were there. And I started interning there. I just started showing up, saying, hey, how can I be helpful? So I was the guy who was, letting people in for events, cleaning up afterward, cleaning the bathroom, whatever had to be done, I was doing it. And I put aside the fact that, in one industry, I was well known and was very successful. I left that at the door and said, I got to start over, ground zero. And if that means I'm there washing dishes, after an event, that's what I'm going to do. So I did all those things. And eventually I started meeting people. And one person I met, his name was Clint Bajakian. And we had a great conversation just about game music in general, talking about our games. And it actually was an event for Uncharted.
Oh.
So I was really excited to talk to him about the music because I really enjoyed the game. And he was like, okay. And I told him what I wanted to do, that I wanted to move from my software life into doing music for games and TV and whatnot. And he's like, all right, I like you. Why don't you come down to my offices, next week? And we'll talk more about, your journey.
At that point, you said you'd made a couple tracks like on GarageBand. Did you kind of bring like Was that like your demo reel? Hey, this is the way I demo. Yeah,
I didn't play it for him at that point because we were just at an event. But yeah, I had some music at this point because I was taking classes at Berkeley, so I had to produce music for those classes. And I'd moved up. I moved up to Logic at that point in time, and I had a few new libraries by East West and this and that. You know, the nice thing about making this transition is that since I had a job, I had disposable income, so I could actually buy things, right? Even though they weren't making me any money, I could still, purchase.
it's an investment.
It was an investment, right? I didn't know how much investment was going to be, but it was an investment. First, it was a hobby. So, he says, well, I asked Clint, I said, well, I'd love to come down to your offices. Where you work? Oh, I'm the head of game music for Sony PlayStation.
Oh.
I was like, what? You got to be kidding me, really? And he said, yeah, come on down. So I went down to the gleaming castle of Sony PlayStation, and I believe they were in San Mateo or Culver City. No, San Mateo, California. And I tell you, it was just the most inspiring experience I'd had to date. Seeing the facilities and the just the aura of being in a place where so many beloved games, their audio was produced, about the entire team, and he spent the whole day with me.
Oh, wow.
And he charted out and said, you know what? I like you. By this point, I had played him some of my music when I was there. And he was like, you know what? Your music is interesting because you make interesting choices. And he told me how some of the things that I had done musically were interesting choices. Because music at the end of the day is just choices. You're just choosing certain things. And that choices are, molded by your experience. They're molded by what you like, right? Molded by what works under your fingers. But they're still just choices that we have. And he said, I like your choices. He says, they're very musical. And so there's something here. He says, but before anybody takes you seriously, you're going to have to go to USC.
For a master's?
For a master's in film scoring.
Gotcha.
He said, because most of the composers that we hire, have that credential. And he said, honestly, no one's going to really hire you to do any sort of serious work as an executive from a Silicon Valley company with no real music background, right? Or at least music background that's not relevant to today. I mean, mine was like 15 years ago. So he said, the nice thing about going to a place like USC is if you get in, because it was the #1 film school in the country, or actually in the world at the time. So, it wasn't just a given that I was going to get in. But he said, if you get in and you complete, it's tabula rasa, right? People are going to look at you from that point forward.
You're going to have that pedigree.
And you're going to have that pedigree, but no one's going to look past that pedigree, and you can truly start over. Now, did I know what start over really meant at the time? Of course not, right? But I was like, yes, okay, now I got to get into USC. And that was sort of the next quest. I felt like this was a series of video game side quests or main quests that I had to keep completing to get to the goal. And I guess I'm still on that quest, looking for the next goal.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it's lost on a lot of people today that they don't embrace the journey. They see the destination, but they don't want to go through the journey.
That's true.
Everyone's want a quick fix. Like, how do I be a music composer? Oh, I'll go on Fiverr or some goop like that. But, embracing the journey, taking your lumps, if you want to say, making relationships, it's almost like a lost art.
I agree with you, because what we see is we see the success, right? Which we see the person that popped out of the water. It's like, oh, we don't see the massive amount of infrastructure, relationships, education, experience that's under the water. It's the iceberg effect, right? Mm-hmm. We only see the top of the iceberg. The bottom of the iceberg is massive.
Yeah.
And that's what I think any sort of successful, musician or politician or anybody, their iceberg under the water is massive, but we don't see that.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of leads into like how we met.
Yes.
We met at African-American networking thing called Mokiti.
Oh, wow. Right. I do remember that.
Mokiti. To get the dust going.
Oh, yeah.
And then I met you, and I met people like, Steven.
That's right.
And like Vince Allen.
And Derek Dow was there as well.
And a bunch of folks. Mm-hmm. And then, off of that, I engaged you to do the score for the short film, Forgiveness.
That's right.
And here on the show, we want to kind of get under the hood. Like, how do you get a piece of paper or a script, you're commissioned, you look at the words, how does that process start? Where basically, I guess you're a vessel for the music to come in.
Usually there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth
Like,
when you're trying to figure out what you got to do.
okay,
But, honestly, you try and find something in the story that you can sort of lock on to, because music for media, it's not about mimicking what's on screen or mimicking what's in the script. It's about finding some other element, some hidden layer that you can accentuate, pull out, right, between the words, that the music can actually help give the audience that experience. You're trying to sometimes illuminate the hidden motivations of the characters, or the things in the story that are causing everybody to react or interact in a certain way. So I'm trying to find that hook, right? Find that little concept in the script and then expand that out in an arc that really touches almost every piece of music that I write, whether it's for the game or for the show, the short, the series, whatever it is. I try and keep an idea of like, what is that concept? What's that little piece of arc that I'm trying to add that will add to the story as opposed to just sort of reflect the story?
Yeah, I mean, some music is it diegetic?
Diegetic, yep.
Or non-diegetic.
That's correct.
And like Scorsese is very kind of diegetic, where his song kind of talks about the tone of what's happening, and like,
yes,
this scene in Goodfellas.
Yes.
Whereas a non-diegetic will almost be contrary to a mood to kind of fill the whole pastiche of how a scene is happening.
That's right. Yeah. And then look, and music can do, a bunch of different things. I mean, it can set a tone, it can set a time and place, it can set pacing, right? It can call out a particular emotion, right? It can tell you some sort of subtext. So there's all the things that music can potentially do in a scene. And then when I work with the director, after I have this sort of idea of what the concept is, and then we agree on that, then it's about, okay, well, what do you want music to do? Or what's the purpose of music in the entire show? And then what's the purpose of music in each of these scenes? In film, everything has a purpose, right? The set design, the costumes, even the makeup, right? All of it has a purpose. All of it is a choice to support the story. The characters that are there, even the background characters, the extras, it's all there to support. It's all intentional.
Yeah, we had a costume designer on last time, and she was basically saying the same thing, that, costume helps the actor, get into their character, the brand of the film, and, and you can see the transformation when all of that collaboration is in tune.
That's right. And I think music has to be treated the same way, is that it's an intentional choice. It's an intentional part of the storytelling. It's a character. And we have to come to terms as far as, well, what is its purpose? If it was a character in the film, what would its purpose be? So I think it's the same thing to ask about the score on a macro, but also on a micro level when you're in a scene. And even when you're within a scene, it can shift and move and dance, right? And what's the point of view of the music at each one of those points?
That's true. And, going over your career, you worked on small things like shorts all the way up to Transformers, which is as big as it gets.
True.
We have a picture posted up here. Can we talk about what was going on here?
Yes, we can.
I see.
So that was a screening for Transformers Rise of the Beasts. Obviously, look, I was extremely proud to work on that project, and I was extremely humbled because the director, Steven Caple Jr., and I went to USC together. So I remember that I had to get into USC. Well, I did get into USC. I did meet, several filmmakers, Steven being one of them. And, I worked on everything that Steven worked on, and his latest project was Transformers Rise of the Beast. And I didn't think that I was going to be hired, but God had other plans and gave me the opportunity. And this is actually at the screening after it had been released, right before it was being released. We had like a little pre-screening, it might have been right after. We had a screening, and I was able to invite, 400 of my family and friends, both from the Composers Diversity Collective and the Alliance of Women Film Composers, two organizations here in LA that really focus on underrepresented groups in composition and film scoring, or really scoring in general. And this was at Paramount, and you could see the joy in my face and the excitement, because that actually is my orchestrator's son who showed up as Optimus Prime. So of course I had to grab him and, just really revel in the moment. It was quite a moment.
Yeah, well deserved. And would you consider that Apex Mountain?
Yeah, it was Apex Mountain. I'm hoping that there's another peak, because, I'm still young and still working.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that there are more peaks. But I mean, obviously that was the highlight of my career, was being able to be a part of such a massive but also well-received, film around the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, it was the #1 film in theaters in the world the weekend it came out. So,
yeah.
I mean, and to be a part of that, and honestly, to be the first African-American to have scored a movie like that was also extremely humbling.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. And then accolades followed, and just opportunities to work on more meaningful and definitive projects, like you have Boots.
That's correct.
Netflix.
That's right.
And I think it's #1 or #2, right?
Well, Boots, it was #2.
Okay.
We peaked at #2. We were right after Monster, the Ed Gein story.
Ed Gein story.
Yeah, Ed Gein story.
The charming little ditty.
I mean, people love serial killers.
Apparently.
Yeah, so I know that, but
I don't have any black ones.
Thank God. But
yeah. Okay, sorry.
So Boots we peaked at #2. Well, we're still in the top 10 after 2 weeks of airing, which is still pretty amazing for us, such as a story. And Boots is about a young man who joins the Marines in the 90s when it was illegal to be gay in the armed forces.
Gotcha.
So this Boots is his experience during boot camp as a gay young man. And it's based on the book, The Pink Marine. So it's a real story, or based on a real story, and a real experience. And, as the showrunner said, the show was not meant to be a polemic, right? It wasn't meant to be a treatise against our current sort of times. But when the Pentagon decides to make a statement about your show, calling it woke garbage, polemic sometimes gets thrust upon you.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud to be a part of a show that is highlighting people that just want to be who they are and do the job that they love.
Yeah. We are running out of time.
You're kidding me, really? Already?
It goes by quick, man. I thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I can't believe we meant to do a part 2 then.
Well, maybe so. We'll talk to the station.
Okay, great.
I'm your host, Satie Gossett. This has been another wonderful episode of Pan and Zoom. Please come back next time to see who we bring on. Until then, keep on filming.
Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Down, face down. You know the routine.